is interesting to contemplate an entangled bank clothed with many plants of many kinds, with birds singing in the bushes and various insects flitting about, and with worms crawling through the damp earth, and to reflect that these elaborately constructed forms, so different from each other, and yet so dependent on each other in so complex a manner, have all been produced by laws acting around us. Thus, from the war of nature, from famine and death, the most exalted object we are capable of conceiving, namely, the production of higher animals, directly follows. There is a grandeur in this view of life. So wrote Charles Darwin. In the Origin of Species, born February 12th in 1809. And this is the Atheist History Club, where we deal with events in atheism week by week throughout the year. The birthdays, the death dates, the important dates. And I'm John Rafferty, President of the Secular Humanist Society of New York, and an active member of New York City Atheists. Welcome to the club. Charles Darwin was born on February 12th in 1809, in England, of course. And during his work as a naturalist, as he sailed around the world on the Beagle, the ship the Beagle, he began documenting and formulating his theory of evolution. And he kept it hidden for many, many years because he was afraid of the backlash which did indeed come. But when he eventually published it, it caused not just a sensation, but it changed the world. As somebody once said, two men were born on the same date in 1809, February 12th. Abraham Lincoln changed America, and Charles Darwin changed the world. The whole concept of biology as we know it was changed with the publication of On the Origin of Species, and then subsequently The Descent of Man. He wrote to Reverend Fordyce in 1879 that an agnostic would be the most correct description of my state of mind. And in his own autobiography he wrote, "I can hardly see how anyone ought to wish Christianity to be true. For if so, the plain language of the text seems to show that the men who do not believe, and this would include my father, brother, and almost all my best friends, will be everlastingly punished. And that is a damnable doctrine." Relating God directly to his study of the plant, insect, and animal world, Darwin wrote, "I cannot persuade myself that a beneficent and omnipotent God would have designedly created parasitic wasps with the express intention of their feeding within the living bodies of caterpillars." Robert Green Ingersoll, probably the most well-known atheist, or as he was called, the great agnostic in America of the 19th century, wrote, "This century, the 19th, will be called Darwin's century. He was one of the greatest men who ever touched this globe. He explained more of the phenomena of life than all of the religious teachers. Write the name of Charles Darwin on the one hand, and the name of every theologian who ever lived on the other, and from that name has come more light to the world than from all of these. His doctrine of evolution, his doctrine of the survival of the fittest, his doctrine of the origin of species, has removed in every thinking mind the last vestige of Orthodox Christianity. He has not only stated, but he has demonstrated that the inspired writer, in other words, the religious writer, knew nothing of this world, nothing of the origin of man, nothing of geology, nothing of astronomy, nothing of nature, that the Bible is a book written by ignorance at the instigation of fear. Think of the men who replied to him. Only a few years ago, there was no person too ignorant to successfully answer Darwin. And the more ignorant he was, the more cheerfully he undertook the task. He was held up to the ridicule, the scorn and contempt of the Christian world, and yet when he died, England was proud to put his dust with that of her noblest and her grandest. Charles Darwin conquered the intellectual world, and his doctrines are now accepted facts. Of course, unfortunately, his concepts of evolution, the origin of species, the descent of man, are not accepted facts in a large part of America. In fact, in about half of America that still doesn't believe in the theory of evolution, the fact of evolution. Charles Darwin, born February 12th in 1809, who changed the world. One of the most outstanding Darwin scholars of our time is someone I know personally, Philip Appleman. On February 8th in 1926, Philip Appleman was born in Kendallville, Indiana. He became subsequently the distinguished professor at Indiana University, considered the poet laureate of humanism and free thought. He's not only a Darwin scholar, but he's published several volumes of poetry. And he is the editor of the impressive and widely used Norton Critical Edition called Darwin. And his writing has appeared in Harper's Magazine, The Nation, New Republic, The New York Times, Paris Review, Partisan Review, Poetry, Sewanee Review, and Yale Review. Phil is an active member of the Secular Humanist Society of New York and of New York City Atheists. And let's take a little sample of his poetry. Try the poem, O Karma, Dharma, Pudding and Pie. O Karma, Dharma, Pudding and Pie, give me a break before I die. Grant me wisdom, will and wit, purity, probity, pluck and grit. Trustworthy, helpful, friendly, kind. Give me great abs and a steel-trap mind. And forgive ye gods some humble advice. These little blessings would suffice to beget an earthly paradise. Make the bad people good and the good people nice. And before our world goes over the brink, teach the believers how to think. How about this one? Last-minute message for a time capsule. I have to tell you this, whoever you are, that on one summer morning here, the ocean pounded in on tumble-down breakers, a south wind, bustling along the shore, whipped the froth into little rainbows, and a reckless gull swept down the beach, as if to fly where everything it needed. I thought of your hovering saucers, looking for clues, and I wanted to write this down so it wouldn't be lost forever. That once upon a time, we had meadows here, and astonishing things, swans and frogs, and luna moths, and blue skies that could stagger your heart. We could have had them still, and welcomed you to earth. But we also had the righteous ones who worship the true faith and holy war. When you go home to your shining galaxy, say that what you learn from this dead and barren place is to beware the righteous ones. Philip Appleman, still writing, still active, still married to lovely Marjorie, born February 8th, 1926. Thomas Alva Edison was born February 11th in 1847. Born in Ohio, the youngest of 7. He read Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire before the age of 10, and at the age of 12 vowed to read the entire contents of the Detroit Public Library, and he probably did. He was self-taught. He supported himself at a very early age, selling newspapers, became a telegraph operator, and he approached the idea of invention from a new perspective. He didn't just putter around. He said, what would work and what would sell if I could make it? And so he did. He invented the incandescent light bulb, the phonograph, the motion picture camera, and improved the telegraph and telephone, becoming one of the most successful businessmen, not only in the United States, but in America. Not only in the United States, but in the whole world. He holds more than 1,300 U.S. and foreign patents. And among all the things he invented, he told the New York Times in an interview in 1915, "I am proud of the fact that I never invented weapons to kill." Was he a free thinker? You bet. So far as the religion of the day is concerned, he said, it is a damn fake. Religion is all bunk. I cannot believe in the immortality of the soul, he told another interviewer. I am an aggregate of cells, as for instance New York City is an aggregate of individuals. Will New York City go to heaven? No. Nature made us. Nature did it all, not the gods of the religions. All Bibles are man-made, he said. And I don't believe that any religion should ever be introduced into the public schools of the United States. He sounds almost like Gandhi when he says, nonviolence leads to the highest ethics, which is the goal of all evolution. Until we stop harming all other living beings, we are still savages. I don't have the exact quote with me, but I read somewhere recently while researching this for this program that he said at one point he not only made money, but he had larger ideas. And he said, I am going to make electricity so cheap that only the rich will be able to afford to burn candles. Not a bad idea. He said, to invent, you need a good imagination and a pile of junk. The Wizard of Menlo Park, New Jersey, where he produced all his inventions, or most of his inventions, and where he worked every day of his life. Except that he's, as he said, and this is fitting for to close the book on Thomas Edison, at least for this week. He said, I never did a day's work in my life. It was all fun. Not a bad appetite for a life. Who else have we got? Alice Walker. Have you seen The Color Purple? Have you read the book? That's Alice Walker. Born February 9th in 1944, the novelist and poet was born in Georgia, the youngest of 8 children in a sharecropping family. She was blinded in one eye during a childhood accident, but went on to become valedictorian at her high school and attended both Spelman College and Sarah Lawrence College on scholarships. She has written not only The Color Purple, her best known, but such books as I Love Myself When I'm Laughing, which is a book of poetry, and then again, I Love Myself When I'm Laughing, and then again When I'm Looking Mean and Impressive. Her views on religion are expressed best in, the only reason you want to go to heaven is that you have been driven out of your mind. She was a Methodist by devout parents, but early in life she observed church hypocrisy, especially the silencing of the women who cleaned the church and kept it alive. Life was so hard for my parents' generation, she wrote, that the subject of heaven was never distant from their thoughts. The truth was, we already lived in paradise, but were worked too hard by the land grabbers to enjoy it. In The Color Purple, the protagonist rebels against a God who act just like all the other men's I know, trifling, forgetful, and low down. I blaspheme much as I wanted. Walker rebelled against the misogyny of Christian teachings and the imposition of a white religion upon the enslaved. She advised, "It is fatal to love a God who does not love you. We have been beggars at the table of a religion that sanctioned our destruction." Describing paganism, she said, describing paganism as of the land, country dweller, peasant. All people deserve to worship a God who also worships them, a God that made them and likes them. That is why nature, Mother Earth, is such a good choice. Never will nature require that you cut off some of your part of your body to please it. Never will Mother Earth find anything wrong with your natural way. It is chilling to think, she wrote, that the same people who persecuted the wise women and men of Europe, its midwives and healers, then crossed the oceans to Africa and the Americas and tortured and enslaved, raped, impoverished, and eradicated the Christ-like people they found, and that the blueprint from which they worked and still work was the Bible. That's Alice Walker. Humanist, atheist, born February 9th. A woman not quite so well known, born February 11th in 1802, Lydia Maria Child. Became a famous abolitionist, author, novelist, and journalist. Who was she? You may not know, but you probably taught your grandchildren the lyrics to her song, "Over the river and through the woods, to grandmother's house we go." She was a writer, a Unitarian, but unchurched most of her life. She ran a school, started the first journal for children, and supported herself and her husband by her writing. Her 2-volume, The History of the Condition of Women in Various Ages and Nations, was published in 1835. She rejected theology, dogma, doctrines, and talked of providence as the inward voice of her conscience. Not bad. She later described religion as simply working for the welfare of the human race. "It is impossible," she wrote, "to exaggerate the evil work theology has done in the world." That's Lydia Maria Child, forgotten now, born February 11th in 1802. One more big name in our weekly review, in our recital of the honor roll of this week. Born February 12th, Abraham Lincoln. Was Lincoln an atheist? No one knows. Was Lincoln even an agnostic? Probably. A free thinker? Certainly. Almost as much as George Washington has been turned into a Christian by the later writers of the religious right. So they have done the same thing with Lincoln. But Colonel Ward H. Layman, a religionist himself and Lincoln's longtime friend, wrote, "Mr. Lincoln was never a member of any church, nor did he believe in the divinity of Christ or the inspiration of the Scriptures in the sense understood by evangelical Christians. When a boy, he showed no sign of that piety which his many biographers ascribe to his manhood. When he went to church at all, he went to mock and came away to mimic. When he came to New Salem, in Illinois, he consorted with freethinkers, joined with them in deriding the gospel story of Jesus, read Volney and Paine, and then wrote a deliberate and labored essay wherein he reached conclusions similar to theirs. Several others who knew Lincoln, not the people who wrote biographies of him after his death and who never knew him or really knew anything much about him, also said the same thing, that he was, one of them said, an infidel. Lincoln went further against Christian beliefs and doctrines and principles than any man I ever heard. But let's not forget something. Abraham Lincoln was a politician, and a very good one. And he knew that his anti-religious views would not get him elected dog catcher, let alone senator, representative to Congress, or president. So several of the people who've known him said, for instance, that labored essay that he wrote about the non-divinity of Jesus, he destroyed it. And he kept his mouth shut about religion. He was not a hypocrite. He did not come out and say that he believed in the divinity of Jesus and the inerrancy of the Christian religion. Absolutely not. But what he did was just keep his mouth shut about it. And during the Civil War, preachers and churchmen of all kinds got together, formed groups, and tried to get him not only to proclaim days of national prayer and fasting, but even to change the Constitution, the opening of the Constitution, that wonderful phrase, "we the people," which says that our government and our laws are dependent upon us ourselves. They wanted him to change it to, among other suggestions, were firm in the belief of the divinity of Jesus Christ, and other things like that. And what he did was just kept ignoring them. He would sit, he would talk to them, he would answer their letters, and then he would just go his own way. By the way, the more spineless members of Congress gave in to them, and they put the infamous phrase, "In God we trust," on coins for the first time. Before that, even though the religious right will tell you that "In God we trust" goes back to the original signers of the Declaration or the Constitution. Not true. It was made up in the Civil War, and when some churchmen talked to members of Congress, said, "Why aren't you willing to put it on coins?" And they said, "Well, yeah, I don't want to lose votes back home," and so they put it on. Lincoln, on the other hand, ignored them. He often referred to the Almighty, to providence, to the rule of heaven and all like that, but to Christianity, to God, no. And in one of the best known passages from his wonderful second inaugural address, he talks about the difference between the North and the South when he says, "Both read the same Bible and pray to the same God, and each invokes his aid against the other. It may seem strange that any men should dare to ask a God's assistance in wringing their bread from the sweat of other men's faces, but let us judge not, that we be not judged." Abraham Lincoln, born February 12th, 1809, an infidel, certainly an agnostic, very likely an atheist. A lot of people will get very angry if you say that. On the other hand, it's probably true. And that is Atheism History Club for this week. I'm John Rafferty, and I hope to see you next week.
Il le filme.
Vas-y. Vincent, mais né en 1970, il a toujours dit qu'il mourrait jeune d'une mort violente.
Oh my goodness! Are you okay?
Yeah.